presentations. I'm going to take 2.12 out, but I'm not going to do that yet, so we'll go to the agenda. First, our comments by board members. I see Supervisor Stone here in the queue. Any others? Supervisor Stone.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to be looking at certainly our recommended budget now and planning for our financial needs between now and September. And I just recently wrote an op-ed in the newspapers, many were published throughout the state, basically admonishing the governor and the state legislature to do what we've done in the county of Riverside with regard to pensions, with regard to consolidations, and in that editorial, if the state of California would just embrace the pension reforms that we've embraced here in the county, it would save the state of California $20 billion a year. Right now we're looking at a $16.5 billion shortfall. This, of course, makes local government, cities and counties very nervous because we all worry what's going to be taken from us this year. It may be different from last year or the year before. This year could be extremely devastating for counties and cities because many are operating on a shoestring now with their reserves depleted, where we've cut through the flesh and now we're down to the bone. So if we see some devastating hits to local government in this state fiscal budget, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when we will see local jurisdictions trying to protect themselves via bankruptcy. I want to share with the board, I received a letter from our presiding judge, Cheryl Ellsworth. In the governor's May budget, he is imposing severe cuts on the state's local courts. A $540 million reduction to the trial courts by sweeping $300 million in local fund balances. Those are the reserves that the courts keep on hand for themselves. And shifting $240 million from court construction funds slated for critical infrastructure projects in this county. If you look at Riverside County, look at our population, and look at the number of judges that we have, it's pale in comparison to the number of judges up in San Francisco County in comparison to their respective populations. So what I'm saying is that the allocation of judges is based more on a political preference and rather a population basis. With the governor's proposal, I'm quoting from the letter, we may be required to close entire courthouses, shut down courtrooms, and further reduce hours of services. Limited resources will be devoted to those cases that take priority by statute, such as criminal and juvenile delinquency proceedings, matters dealing with children, families, mentally ill offenders, victims of domestic violence, the elderly, and self-represented litigants will either be significantly delayed or curtailed. Lesser offenses such as traffic citations will not be processed as a priority, which could result in a significant loss of revenue to the state of California, the county of Riverside, and its cities. Again, the state of California is shooting themselves in the foot. They cut in areas in which they receive revenue. There was a time in this county when to try to get a civil case into court was delayed, and I think all my fellow colleagues on the board agree that justice delayed is justice denied. So please go to the polls today, make sure you register your votes. But if the state of California would do what's right and take responsibility for their share of getting the state back on track, we would be facing these kind of shortfalls. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Supervisor Stone. Supervisor Benoit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, on the comments just made, I would mention that while I was in the legislature, we attempted to get more judges. We actually passed a bill that changed the way they were allocated from a purely political process to a rational workload-based process, which resulted in a plan to do 150 additional judges. We did 1 year of that, and then we ran down the fiscal problems that couldn't continue. We got 7 additional judges for Riverside County while I was there, and last week is were a couple of my colleagues at the CSAC, the California State Association of Counties annual meeting, and during the roundtable we had a visit from Governor Brown, who spent a good deal of time talking about his November initiative and seeking support for that initiative. Whatever way you feel about that initiative, he is committed, he says, to including a pension reform process to be on the November ballot at the same time. I personally have difficulty seeing how he's actually going to make that happen in a capital that is so dominated by the folks it would impact primarily, that I just don't see that he's going to be able to pull that off, but he said he was. And I'd just also like to report that I asked him specifically about our redevelopment projects, and specifically Mountain View Estates in Duraville, and the other 6 other projects that we have in limbo that we actually had time to just talk about Duraville, but he committed to having his staff look into the Riverside County list and get back to us. We talked about a $28 million project where $20 million has been spent. The remaining $7 million is being taken by direction of the Department of Finance. The project will be mothballed, and all of that taxpayer investment will be lost. And he cited a situation on a freeway that was incomplete after his first term and buried a sign for a long time. Thank you, Jerry Brown, for not finishing this, and said he didn't want to see that happen. I hope that they were able to figure out a way to make that not happen again in some of these critical RDA projects that they're cutting off midstream. And the market in your area, that we've done a lot of investment, a lot of money in the ground already, and to stop those projects midway for the very, very small impact that would make on the total budget is really not making a lot of sense for the taxpayers. So we will wait and see. Hopefully he will have his staff take a good look at that, and we'll hear some good news on that review process of the Department of Finance maybe this week. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Supervisor Benoit. No further comments by members of the board. Mr. Executive Officer, do you have some comments?
Guess we have some new buttons here to get used to.
Yes, we do.
Morning. All the polling places are open and serving the voters. I have talked to Carrie Virgil, and things are running smoothly. So we're very pleased with that, and I think she'll be providing updates through Twitter and other electronic media throughout the day. Next week, we will also be returning to the board the Form 11 on our emergency medical system ambulance services. So we look forward to giving the board an opportunity to make a decision next week. Next Monday, we will open our budget hearings on June the 11th, and you will receive presentations from the Chief Financial Officer on our current budget for 12-13. We had earlier discussions in March, and we are proceeding to implement the direction we received at that time. I do not anticipate lengthy budget hearings on June the 11th, and I do not anticipate any discussion or hearings on the 12th that will be needed. We should be able to wrap things up on June the 11th. On June the 13th, the department heads will meet with myself and my staff in a budget summit to explore all cost-saving measures to eliminate the structural deficit for 12-13. We will be returning to finalize the budget in September. Is that correct, Mr. Corser? Yes. And at that time, we will present and we will have no structural deficit. That will mean all departments will need to come together to resolve all cost-saving issues that we can pass along, and to discuss any further cuts that are needed to make up the difference, and or any restructuring. We have already begun to do that restructuring, as we'll talk about next week. We've done that with CHAW. CHAW has been eliminated, and we've had consolidation with RCRMC, with the clinics, and now 3 independent departments. We have taken TLMA, and we're in the process of restructuring those departments into one single department, eliminating duplication, redundancies, and we've taken their IT as a bold step and merging it with RCIT for cost savings in that regard. So you will see these cost savings come about so we can deliver to you an elimination of the structural deficit. We know today you have several items on the board we'll possibly discuss regarding labor agreements that we've reached. These labor agreements will impact us primarily in 13 and 14 and out years, but they were important in that the board has achieved monumental pension restructuring in this county and taken the lead. There will be some discussion, I understand, on 3.39, the management Form 11. I will have some independent recommendations I would like to give to you before we begin that discussion when that item is pulled. And I've taken the prerogative to pull 3.41, and we can consider that in the future. Excuse me.
All right, thank you, Mr. Orr. Excuse me. I see no further comments by members of the board. I have no budget update at this point. I'm sure there will be more coming out of the governor's office as he begins to address the May revise in his budget in the coming weeks ahead. Our auditor controller, Paul Angulo, would like to make a quick update for us on the redevelopment agency dissolution process. I know that I read an email from the city of Riverside, and some of their projects that were initially turned down through the Department of Finance have been reinstated, which is good, so they can finish those projects, fire department, fire station downtown, and some others. I'm sure that's going to be part of the process as the State Department of Finance finds that they are in over their heads with this process. So, Paul.
Yes, sir.
All well-laid plans are meant to be flawed.
Okay. Let me try to.
Great.
I don't want to interrupt this. Mr. Chairman, honorable board, Mr. Orr, Ms. Walls, Long Little Auditor Controller. I have with me Aaron Wiles, our chief for property tax, and knowledge expert in California, and very sought after for their opinion. I'd like to give you a status update on the AB 126 redevelopment dissolution, because we've reached critical milestones on Friday. And Pam's going to elaborate just a little on some of the key points.
Pam, is your mic working, George? No? No mics.
She can come back here, Mr. Chair, and use mine.
Yeah. If you want to come up here or be a stand-in supervisor today.
This one's working.
Now I'm really nervous. Okay.
Supervisor.
Hurry up.
Thank you. All right.
You're not armed, are you?
No. Okay. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Ms. Walls, and Mr. Orr. Yes, just for a brief update on the redevelopment dissolution that I've been asked to give this morning. We had a statutory deadline of June 1st to get the distribution done. We have $306 million that we need to distribute. On Friday, we were able to distribute $235.8 million. and that is for 20 successor agencies, former redevelopment agencies. We actually have 5 that remain to be distributed, and the primary reason that those have not been distributed is because of their payment obligations exceed the revenue. So we are working with them. We've worked with several of them and got it down to 5. We anticipate getting 3 done in the next few days. And 2 of them, we're working with the State Controller's Office on those issues in accordance with the state law. We have distributed the payments by following the Health and Safety Code, which there were some complex issues with the Health and Safety Code and interpretations of the law. And what we did with our methodology is we followed the advice of the Department of Finance and worked with our counsel to distribute the pass-throughs in accordance with their interpretation of the law, which was, bottom line, to keep pass-throughs intact. And versus the methodology of the Legislative Analyst Office, which was to determine the pass-through amounts and cut them based on payment obligations, which would have been millions of dollars cut to pass through to taxing agencies, including the county, some cities, special districts, and school districts. The negative impact would have, as I indicated, would have been multi-millions of dollars actually, but it was reduced to a cut of 1.8 million countywide. And in general, as I stated, that 1.8 million would have been spread across schools, general fund, fire and library, and special districts, and some cities. So basically, that's my update. Do you have any questions? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. That was our update. In summary, I wanted to acknowledge the tremendous work, the Herculean effort made by the property tax team, and the vital support provided by the Executive Office, County Council, Enterprise Solutions Division, formerly Oasis, and the bank who was on standby. This was an extraordinary effort by multiple county teams to make this happen and keep the cities going, the schools functioning, and special districts. I think it's important to acknowledge the tremendous effort because county workers have become the whipping boys, the whipping posts in California of all things evil. And they're not. They do tremendous work. And I'm proud to be able to report that everything is working without a hitch and that the dissolution continues. Thank you.